Tonight we begin with a decision that Washington officials had feared, predicted, and quietly prepared for. A political reversal that unfolded not over months but in a single day. A single day that shook party unity. A single day that forced a leadership recalculation. And a single day that left a senior enforcement figure suddenly sidelined. What Donald Trump did today crossed a line that Republican leaders had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, party insiders did not hesitate. They responded with pressure, public criticism, and behind-the-scenes demands for change. By nightfall, that change had a name, Greg Bovino. For weeks now, there had been signals, not official briefings, not formal statements, just signals, that Trump's allies were preparing something unusually aggressive in response to unrest tied to immigration enforcement in Minnesota. Trump has long been confrontational, yes, but he has also been strategic in his confrontations. His political playbook often follows a certain pattern: a build-up, a dramatic escalation, then a test of loyalty. But what set off alarm bells inside the GOP this time was that the pattern went silent. No trial balloons. No leaks. No advance messaging. Experts who monitor political operations know the indicators. The sudden tightening of inner circle messaging. The absence of advance coordination with party leadership. The quiet movement of federal personnel. And the sudden shift in tone from campaign rhetoric to executive-style language. All of that went quiet. And whenever Trump goes quiet, it usually means something loud is coming next. Early this week, senior Republican officials became aware of what they described as an operational push tied to federal immigration enforcement posture, including personnel decisions and tactical endorsements that had not been publicly discussed in months. These are the kinds of moves Trump only makes when he's signaling something very specific: strength, control, or defiance. Observers didn't yet know which category this fell into, or whether it was all three at once. But what they did know was that Trump was changing political posture. And when a figure with his influence shifts posture without explanation, even slightly, party leadership pays attention. Because posture in politics isn't just optics. It's direction. The response from Republican lawmakers was not normal. It wasn't routine. It wasn't symbolic. It was urgent. Sources leaving private caucus conversations described the move as provocative, politically risky, and most importantly, poorly timed, given the party's internal divisions. Hardline tactics may energize a base, but they can fracture a coalition. And that fracture line was already visible. Trump's strategy only works if critics hesitate. This time, they didn't. In fact, the internal pushback was among the fastest inter-party reactions seen in recent years. Within hours of concerns surfacing, influential Republican figures began calling for a reset, not publicly at first, but directly. And at the center of the storm was Greg Bovino, a senior border enforcement official known for his tough posture and vocal defense of aggressive immigration tactics. BY evening, multiple sources confirmed that Bovino would no longer serve in the same visible leadership capacity tied to the Minnesota controversy. The move wasn't framed as punishment. It was framed as reassignment. But in Washington, reassignment at moments like this carries its own message. This wasn't about routine rotation. It was about political containment. Party leaders feared that tying the GOP brand too closely to controversial enforcement optics in a politically sensitive state could cost them support among moderates and suburban voters. So they acted before the narrative hardened. They didn't attack the policy directly. They didn't denounce enforcement. They targeted the symbol. They targeted the face of the strategy. They targeted the visibility of the move. In other words, they targeted the part that could do the most political damage. And here's where the story becomes even more revealing. Sources close to party leadership believe the original posture was designed to test Republican tolerance for renewed hardline immigration theatrics during a sensitive political moment. Trump wanted to see who would stand firm, who would stay quiet, and who would push back. He got his answer. Because instead of silence, he got resistance, swift, coordinated, and unusually direct. Lawmakers who rarely contradict him signaled discomfort. Strategists warned of electoral consequences. Donors reportedly raised concerns about independent voter backlash. You don't often see that level of unified caution directed toward Trump from inside his own party. But today it happened. One GOP strategist described the moment as a boundary check, a test of how far enforcement rhetoric could go before political gravity kicked in. And gravity kicked in fast. As the day unfolded, more became clear about the scale of the response. Senior Republicans worked behind the scenes to cool rhetoric tied to the Minnesota situation. Party operatives shifted media focus toward border policy broadly, away from specific tactical imagery. Leadership figures emphasized law and order language without endorsing operational escalation. This wasn't just message adjustment. This was narrative control. This was political damage prevention. And damage prevention is something Trump's critics inside the GOP have struggled to enforce in the past. But this time, they moved early. Before the issue could become a defining headline. Remember, Trump has often believed that his party would fall in line, that criticism would fade, that escalation would dominate the news cycle long enough to work. But tonight, something different happened. Pushback came quickly. Optics were recalibrated, and a high-profile figure associated with the approach was moved out of the spotlight. That's not rebellion, but it is resistance. What makes this moment so delicate is that it comes at a time when Trump faces pressure from multiple directions. Hardliners want full confrontation. Moderates want stability. Strategists want electability. Donors want predictability. Balancing those demands is never easy. And when sudden tactical endorsements emerge without consensus, they expose those fault lines instantly. Leaders in strong positions take bold risks. Leaders under pressure take symbolic risks. And sometimes those risks force quick retreats. Official statements were carefully worded. They emphasized ongoing evaluation. They stressed organizational needs. They avoided the word discipline. But the subtext was clear. The party was not willing to let one tactical posture define its broader political strategy. When Washington uses calm language during a sudden shift, it usually means the storm happened behind closed doors. Public remarks later, Trump focused on border security broadly, not on personnel. He said, "We want strong enforcement, but we want smart enforcement." He added, "We're going to do what's right for the country." And he emphasized, "Our focus is results." Those are not retreat words. They are repositioning words. What adds complexity is that immigration politics isn't slowing down. States are clashing with federal authorities. Cities are debating cooperation. Courts are weighing limits. And each flashpoint raises the stakes for national figures tied to the debate. That's why internal party discipline matters more than ever. Analysts see several possibilities. One is that this was a one-time recalibration. Another is that party leaders are quietly drawing new boundaries around enforcement optics. A third, the most significant, is that internal resistance to politically risky escalation is growing stronger. But today, at least temporarily, this is ultimately a test of control. Trump wants to show he still drives the agenda. Party leaders want to show they can steer the strategy. Voters will decide which approach they reward. Tonight, sources say conversations are continuing. They say messaging discipline is tightening. And they say future moves will be more coordinated. The response today, swift, quiet, and calculated, sent a message to Trump that political capital has limits. And it sent a message to party leaders that collective pressure can still shape outcomes. A temperature drop. As the week continues, more details may emerge about how this unfolded behind the scenes. But what we do know is this. The reaction was fast. The adjustment was real. And the signal was unmistakable. What happens next depends on whether this was a pause or a pivot. And tonight, for the first time in weeks, the rhetoric has cooled. Minnesota is quieter. Party leadership is quieter. Too quiet. Because when political movements go quiet, it usually means strategy is being rewritten. And tonight, Trump may have been reminded of something Washington teaches again and again. Power tests limits. Pressure reveals alliances. And even the loudest strategies can be softened when the stakes get high enough. This story isn't over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The party pushed back. The strategy shifted.